So the South African National Biodiversity Institute, or SANBI, was nominated to be accredited with the Adaptation Fund by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment to act as the national designated authority of the Adaptation Fund in South Africa. Once SANBI was accredited, South Africa had access to $10 million to program to support the building of climate resilience of vulnerable communities in the country. SANBI ran a process to call for ideas from across the country, from all sectors and in all parts of all provinces. And one of two projects that were selected was the uMngeni Resilience Project, which is a $7.5 million project to build the adaptive capacity of vulnerable communities in the uMngungundlovu district municipality.
The strategic objectives for the district is to assist in providing climate prevention before occurrences and assist in reporting early warnings, fire detections, building the climate resilience of rural communities by climate proofing houses, stormwater drainage, as well as channels and low levels river crossing. Also the issue of employment opportunities. And we've been grateful as uMngungundlovu district municipalities, especially on the municipalities within our district that have been beneficiaries to this particular project.
In terms of the URP as a project, it is a cross-cutting project which calls for an integrated climate change adaptation approach. So by its design, the project was always integrated. For example, Component 1 speaks to early warning systems. Component 2 speaks to built infrastructure and ecological infrastructure. Component 3 speaks to climate smart agriculture. And the fourth component speaks to mainstreaming lessons learned. And if you look at these 3 or 4 components, they might seem disjointed to you, but they're actually very well integrated. And I think that was one of the unique things about the URP, that it understood and contextualized the complexity of climate change and the realities of climate change, which are really cross-cutting and therefore need these integrated approaches if you are going to deliver meaningful impact at a scale.
A community ground-based near real-time lightning warning system was installed within the community of uMngeni. So what the system actually did was basically disseminate using audible and visible alarm systems. So the lightning warning system consisted of a siren and a beacon lights in that regard. And what was also quite unique about the system was that it could take it a step ahead and automate written notifications by SMSs as well as emails at nominated action or threat level. And in doing so, what this would do is that it would provide, for example, the rural communities, your farmers on the ground, as well as municipal officials and disaster management officials with some sort of a measurable threshold upon which they could then react to on site.
The specific site at uMngeni High School was absolutely perfect for the measurement of lightning. It's located on this ridge with these valleys running down onto the sides. And a ridge is an area that is particularly prone to lightning and where you're most likely to get your ground strikes. So it made the value in installing the system very relevant. And particularly because you've got a high density of population, people at the school. In terms of the number of people we're covering, there was good value for the investment in the URP project.
I'm Terry Tedder from the Richmond Fire Protection Association. We've been running the association since 2008. We've had camera detection in the Richmond area since 1994. So the early warning system just made absolute part of, or fitted into our program, our objectives very well. And we got involved with the program and we managed to get funding for 2 cameras, one in the Richmond area, one in the uMngeni area. The whole operation is to detect to pick up exactly where it is, to disseminate the information, and then also from the Fire Protection Association side is to coordinate the fighting of that fire, to get people, to get vehicles to go and put that fire out, hopefully before it becomes a hazard or causes death or loss of life or animals and infrastructure as well. What are we there for? We are there to make a difference. We want to detect fires early. We want to get people on the ground. We want to help the communities where we can.
The main aim of the project was to develop a real-time and forecasting early warning system for uMngungundlovu District Municipality. And the anticipated outcome was then that the system will then be able to inform decision-making of the disaster management in terms of how to respond effectively in terms of flood management. So it will inform their flood mitigation planning. The three components of the real-time monitoring system includes the rainfall runoff model, which is where the flows are simulated or modeled. And the second part of the system is the Mike Workbench, which is actually a decision support system with a database where then the rainfall runoff model is integrated to real-time information and the forecasted information. And then there's also Mike Operations. It's part of the system which then presents the results or the outputs of the system, and you can actually view the actual outputs of the system in that component of the system. But the other component, which is also very important, was the flow gauges that had to be installed in the rivers, because in the pilot areas, we had to identify suitable sites in the rivers where we can be able to receive flow information that will also be feeding into the system.
Component 2 of the uMngeni Resilience Project focuses on the built environment and ecological infrastructure. There is a need within the community to understand what sustainability is about, finding new ways of building, the use of building materials in a sustainable way, or even the rejection of materials that have been used for years that are basically more a problem than a solution. So component 2 included the retrofitting of 300 homesteads under sustainable principles, 10 kilometers of storm water channels, 5 water crossing bridges, 150 kilometers of fire breaks, 50 hectares of invasive species removal, a rangeland management plan. The project basically tackles the hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure, and a very important aspect of the project was capacity building within the area, within the community. There was a number of workshops that were conducted in terms of basically building up knowledge around sustainability. We're grateful that we have the chance to collaborate with highly qualified stakeholders such as researchers from the UKZN, the Duzi uMngeni Conservation Trust and the Institute of Natural Resources.
We've worked both here at uMngungundlovu as well as at inclusivity. Our focus here at uMngungundlovu has been on rangeland management. So working with the team to come up with a rangeland management plan, working mainly with the Dip Tank Association and looking at ways to manage it in a more sustainable way. We introduced a rotational rest system whereby 25% of the grazing area is rested in any 1 year for a full growing season. That's from basically once the rains start in spring until the first frosts in around May. And the idea is that that gives the grass a chance to recuperate, and it also means that fodder is then available for the animals to eat in winter. And then because we were resting rangeland, we realized that we needed to also protect it from fire. So we've also were involved with burning fire breaks around the rested areas, just to make sure that that feed wasn't lost, because otherwise obviously it would be a huge impact for livestock owners.
Component 3 is focusing on building resilience to smallholder farmers to cope with climate change. We are looking at trying to increase their yields as well as link them with markets, register them into cooperatives and link them with potential markets and formalize a partnership between them and markets. The third objective is also looking at mainstreaming climate smart agricultural practices with the ongoing activities. For instance, like looking at other projects that are trying to projects with the same objective and try to link with them, link with extension officers. We're working with smallholder farmers who are growing vegetables and crops, and they're mostly planting their vegetables and crops primarily for their household consumption, and they sell the surplus to the market. Most of them are female, and most of them, the household within the community is female-headed. Most garden setting that we have here, we have community gardens as well as individual farmers who are planting or growing their crops at their household.
My main job was to assist in the design of energy smart and climate smart agricultural water management interventions. Our irrigation system obtains or abstracts water from a nearby borehole source that is powered by a couple of solar panels, which is your green energy and an energy smart intervention. So this pump conveys water to a JoJo tank in each field, and this JoJo tank has a capacity of about 10,000 liters. And from the JoJo tank to the field, it's all gravity-fed drip irrigation systems. So the system at Swaimani combines a whole bunch of climate smart interventions, energy, water, and knowledge smart, because we also encourage farmers to interact from different gardens. In addition to our interventions at the gardens, we are pro-green technologies and interventions. This is evidenced by a demo greenhouse plot that we established at Swaimani High School. This system harvests water from the school roofs into a JoJo tank, and it's gravity fed to the greenhouses where they do seedling production, tomato production, etc. We are for climate smart interventions, we are for stakeholder engagement, and we are for contextualized and bespoke interventions so that everything that we do and implement is fit for purpose and it's an intervention that doesn't fail.
Today here at uMngungundlovu Primary School, we're here to raise awareness on climate change and extreme weather conditions. The reason we're here, as you can see, it's raining today and we're approaching winter, so we have to raise the awareness on how to live under the conditions of the climate change, because it's no longer a myth.
I-project basically it's a climate change project. Sekuba nomoya nangayiphi season. There is impact of climate change. Is sign yokuthi climate change is no longer a myth.
It is very important and critical that young people are educated about climate change, especially at an early age, so that they get to know as to the do's and don'ts, and then you give them basic principles to say that if you're faced with situations like this, then this is how you need to respond.
This launch was very, very successful. We look at the attendance of umphakathi, looking at the attendance of the stakeholders, looking at the coordination of the actual event. We were graced by the leadership, traditional leadership of this area in Azuke, who had graced us. We had Izinduna, we had a representative of the local chief who was also here.
Community buy-in is important when implementing projects like this, as we have been fostering community involvement. You cannot implement a successful community project without the involvement of the people. We've been working closely with the ward councillors within the affected municipalities, as well as the traditional leadership that exists, because most of these areas are rural.
Having the University of KwaZulu-Natal as an implementing partner on the uMngeni Resilience Project has been fantastic. The academic rigor that a university brings to a project like this is really appreciated by both ourselves and the funders. The fact that the university brings a research element to the work and applies that rigor to everything it does creates an environment where an evidence base is created, which is appreciated by SAMBI in reporting back to the fund. The additional resources that the university has been able to bring to the project have also been really, really valuable in making sure that the project not only delivers on what it is contracted to do so, but extends beyond that and extends to other areas that wouldn't have been possible to achieve without the additional support that the university has been able to bring to the project.
My master's study was looking at how adoption of climate-smart agricultural practices affects farmers' welfare. How does it influence their livelihoods? It's an encouraging environment to study, and it's also encouraging to bridge that gap between the researchers and the farmers. There's a lot of information that have been published, and which can be very useful to farmers, which end up not reaching to the farmers. There's also a lot of indigenous knowledge that is important on the ground, which also doesn't reach to the researchers.
Thanks to the URP, I was able to actually produce a PhD thesis on this instrumentation, which was quite an honor and privilege because it's such an amazing system, and I was able to then look at the data in terms of what's happening with the system on the ground. How is it measuring what it's meant to?
One of the fantastic things about the URP project is that there was implementation and interaction with communities. In the research world and in academia, we so often get caught up in our own spaces, and we do our little bit of research and we have findings and we write them up and they get published somewhere on the internet, and they add no value to the people on the ground, communities in the country.
Something that I think the uMngeni Resilience Project has really been good at is building the capacity of young people to be involved in the work. And it's really incredible to see how many young, amazing, talented, committed people there are who are involved right across the project, all the way from grassroots level to the NGOs, to national and subnational government, to the academic institutions, who are bringing this passion and this wisdom and this way of working in incredibly integrated ways into the way that the project is delivered, and it gives me hope. The Indaba that we've been at for the last couple of days has been quite an extraordinary moment, because we're sitting in a room here with more than 100 people who are incredibly engaged and working not in a way that is about finding out who did something wrong, but finding a way of how we can work together to find solutions. And it's quite extraordinary after an 8-year project to have developed a community of partners who together believe that if we work together, we can find solutions in integrated ways that we wouldn't be able to do on our own.
what's so critical for Sunday is that we look at projects and we pursue projects that would have multiple benefits. Biodiversity benefits from an ecological perspective, social benefits, economic benefits. This one brings everything together. Not only about that, but also pursuing sustainable development. I mean, we're talking about these triple challenges facing South Africa: unemployment, inequality, poverty, and this project hits right there where it matters.
The uMngeni Resilience Project has been an excellent project, and it is beginning to sensitize communities on the impact of climate change. We need to be scaling it up to other areas so that by the time the impact of climate change intensifies, those other communities are also ready and prepared in the same way as the uMngeni Resilient Project has done.
What I find really exciting about this project is that it's recognizing that we have different knowledge systems. So we have this wonderful partnership with the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where they bring the science, but also we are bringing in the local and traditional knowledge when it comes to how do we adapt to climate change, and recognizing that people have hundreds of years of experience in terms of coping with floods or coping with drought, and to build on that knowledge. Also, what's so exciting for me is the partnership with the municipality. For me, the need to strengthen institutions so that we have sustainability going forward, and that we have the impact. So by coming together as partners and getting our hands dirty together, we get to strengthen those institutions and develop skills and develop capacity.
And as we are coming to the end of the URP after 8 long years, of which the project was initially planned to be 5, a clear lesson and the big call is, the URP had a budget of $7.5 million. And I keep telling people that it's a drop in the ocean compared to the scale and the enormity of the challenge. Whilst we have been successful in piloting, useful interventions, these really need to be scaled up and replicated if we are to achieve the sort of impact that is needed to shift, the paradigms and to really take people's lives and make them resilient to climate change. So whilst there are lessons that have been learned from the URP in terms of what works, that integrated approaches work, that building from the bottom and community-based approaches work, that systemic approaches are needed to addressing complex challenges, the scale of the investment also needs to match the ambition. And I think as we go forward and as we venture into new areas and solicit new projects, we really need to match the ambition with the right level of budget. We need to be broad-based and inclusive, make sure that everyone is part of the conversations in the beginning. It's harder to bring people into the conversation later on when it has already started. It's easy to start off with everyone and build momentum from the word go. So those are some of the lessons that we are learning and taking from the URP, and hoping also to scale these across the region. Because climate change is not just a South African issue, it's a global issue. We have a responsibility in this generation to ensure that we leave this planet habitable and enjoyable for future generations that are going to come after us. We have a responsibility not just to ourselves, not just to our children, but their children and those who shall come hundreds of years long after we've gone. we should be remembered as the generation that stood and made a decision to say, not in our time and not in future's time will we allow things to change.